Ready to go? Well, good evening and welcome once again to the discussion group here at the Dole Institute. I'm glad that it's sunny. Last time we were here a couple weeks ago and it was rainy and cold, so I'm glad the sun came out this week. The discussion group series is the elusive quest for the lacrosse mom, how companies and communities and organizations can engage women at all levels. And Ashley Davis is our guest this afternoon. And in keeping in line with the theme, Ashley is someone that touches all facets of engaging women in corporations at the political level and with grassroots organizations. So Ashley was the first woman to lead the government relations arm of a major law firm, and today she runs West Front Strategies, a lobbying firm that she helped found in 2015. Ashley manages operations and budgets and is an advocate for her Fortune 500 clients before the legislative and executive branches of the U.S. government. Her clients include Microsoft, Adobe, Aetna, Expedia, and Walgreens. Ashley served as a special assistant to the National Director of Homeland Security, Tom Ridge, in the White House following the attacks of September 11th. After the White House, she became a managing principal at Blank Rome and managed the law firm's strategic alliances with over 20 international public affairs firms. Ashley has served in various roles in every national Republican convention between 2000 and 2012 and is an active fundraiser for the Republican Party, and we'll talk more about that. She sits on several boards, such as Vital Voices, Women's Democracy Network at the IRI Institute, and she's a member of the Board of Trustees at Westminster College, her alma mater, and she sits on the board of the National Museum of Women in the Arts, very multifaceted. So, but most importantly, she climbed Mount Kilimanjaro this past summer, and we are definitely going to talk more about that. So, let's get started. So, you have such a rich background, and I know that everyone here is probably very interested, given the national security issues we've got going on right now. Can you tell the audience a little bit about your time in the White House with Governor Ridge? And I understand you were there during 9/11, so I know many of them want to hear about that.
Sure. I thank you all for coming, first of all, and look forward to your questions. I love this audience because I did a speech a few weeks ago talking about 9/11 and the aftermath of 9/11 at a university, and everyone in the audience was like 6 during 9/11, so they had no idea what I was talking about or remembered it. So I think you will appreciate some of the stories. So I was on the Bush campaign in 1999, 2000, and I see my ACLU member here. I'm sorry if I'm a Bush girl. But I'm just kidding, by the way. And my wild feminist girl over here.
Who's a loyal supporter and comes every week.
I like it. I was doing government, I worked for Governor Ridge when he was a governor in Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from, and did some state lobbying, but joined the Bush campaign in 1999, 2000. At 26 years old, it was a great experience, traveled the country with him, more on the political side of the campaign. But, and then of course, for those that you remember, we thought we were done, and then we had to go look at hanging chads for, 6 weeks in Florida to count the ballots. So, joined the administration at the beginning in management administration, which was something it's an office that oversees the White House military office, which pretty much runs the nuts and bolts of the White House, and Marine One and Air Force One, and then also in that office is all like White House administration, which is hiring and firing of people in the administration. So I was young, very young, and was going to just do it for a year, and I thought liked Washington, but that was not a dream of mine to move to Washington, to be honest with you. I just kind of fell into it with working on this campaign. And then 9/11 happened. And my office, the first 9 months, was in the basement of the West Wing. And And there were, and this is all unclassified now because of just what happened after 9/11, but it was amazing to me. My office was right beside the Situation Room, and literally people started coming out of my ceilings in my office that were part of the security around the White House. And there we were, because we were in charge of the military, we were having meetings in the bunker, which is where a lot of the meetings took place, and they were bringing the vice president down. And as you know, this was when the third plane hit the Pentagon. And Secretary Mineta, who was the Secretary of Transportation at the time, was literally calling down planes off the radar because they didn't know where all the different planes were, and they didn't know what else was hijacked. And then shortly after, the fourth plane went down in Pennsylvania. And my boss at the time, we were evacuating the West Wing, evacuating the Eisenhower Executive Office building, which is where the main staff sit. That's kind of adjacent to the West Wing in the White House. And my boss looked at me and said, because no one knew what was going on, and he said, "We need people to stay, but I have no idea if we're going to live or die." Because at that time, there were so many rumors that this car bomb was going off and this car bomb was going off, all over the city, and everything was. So it's like, I'm staying, of course. And so it was a very interesting day and time. I was there. There was only about 5 of us at the time that stayed back, and there was absolutely no communication. There were no BlackBerries or cell phones or iPhones didn't exist for sure. And the only way that people could communicate were the GSA people, which are like the how do you explain it? The people that kind of manage the nuts and bolts of the administration, okay? Or of the White House, and all buildings, actually, all government buildings. They had those two-way radios,
those things,
like,
yes. Yeah.
And that was the only thing that worked. And so we were trying to get down to the bunker where the vice president was, and the Situation Room was trying to call them. And I mean, it was just, the communication breakdown was amazing, and not in a good way. But they also, all the walls in the West Wing are, open up to different, they have different, lots of protection are within the walls of the West Wing, which was very interesting to see. And I'm giving this long answer, if that's okay.
That's fine.
But it
Right.
is, I was the person that greeted the president when he came off of Marine One that evening, when they finally allowed him to come back to the White House, which is true. He was not allowed to come back, which everyone criticized him from the other side, saying that he didn't come back. And so that night really changed my life in regards to, I had no idea who Osama bin Laden was. I had no idea any of that. But it really changed my life in regards to the path that I took in the next, actually, 15 years afterwards, really. Because shortly after that, Tom Ridge came down, was the first Homeland Security Director in the White House. And I ended up working with him in the White House for 3 years as we started the agency. And then afterwards, when
An agency, you mean Department of Homeland
the Department of
Security.
Homeland Security,
Yep.
which was the first department that I think was made since the 50s, the first federal agency that was made since the 50s. And it was 160,000 employees and lots of different agencies coming together, and some would still argue that it still doesn't function well. But and then after that, even in my going to my law firm practice and doing government affairs from there, a lot of it has been in the Homeland Security area. I have definitely branched out since, but
Right.
it was really a main focus and a life changer for my life.
If you could reflect and perhaps share some other lessons learned during your time in the White House, positive, negative, just, as you think about how you've built your business and several businesses after leaving the White House, maybe reflect on some of the other lessons learned that have helped you in dealing with your clients and as you built your businesses?
I would say my biggest lesson that I learned was returning people's phone calls and making sure to always do that. After 9/11, you can imagine, and the Homeland Office was set up, every company in the United States and around the world said they had some widget that would, protect the country this way, and they wanted to sell it to the government. So literally thousands of phone calls, and we started our day at 5:30 in the morning. But I remember I would return every single person's phone call, no matter who it was, sometimes at 5:30 in the morning, because they maybe weren't going to be there to answer it. But it's helped tremendously, and it's something that I always tell people, especially now lobbying. A lot of staff on the Hill is a lot younger, as many of you may or may not know, and they don't return people's phone calls or emails, and I'm like, it's going to come back and bite you. It's the most important thing to do, because I remember who doesn't return my phone call.
Right.
And so there's many lessons, and I have so many positive things to say about how President Bush ran his administration, as you know as well. But that's my biggest lesson that I will take with me.
Good. If you were in the position to do this, what advice would you give this particular White House and administration, given your background in Homeland Security? What advice would you give them in navigating these major issues that we have with Iran, Russia, North Korea? Is there any insight that, you...
I was just thinking of how many advice of this administration. Well, I think that this president has... I think that he has strength, and many people are going to disagree with this comment. When we were in, and now when the President Trump is in, I do feel that the world looks at us again as a strong power with our military. And I do think that that's very important for some of these regions. And I don't have access to, classified information anymore because I'm not in administration. But I remember what President Bush was criticized about in regards to many different things in regards to national security. But no one knew the intel that really exists out there about how dangerous some of these people are.
And the axis of evil I'm thinking of, right?
And I think that, and I'm not going to make a political statement here about the previous administration, but I think when Syria happened and that administration stepped back on what they said was going to happen if the chemical weapons were used, I think that people didn't take us seriously. And I do think, even though Trump has a different style, President Trump has a different style, but I do think that the United States is respected, at least in regards to a military power, again, in this country. I mean, North Korea, listen, do I think World War III is going to start, or we're going to attack North Korea? No. But I think that he is going to take Trump a little bit more serious than he would take some others.
Fair enough. And for our students here today, if they were interested in pursuing perhaps a career in defense industries or a national security type of career, what type of advice would you give them in terms of perhaps academic courses to pursue or internships to pursue? What type of advice would you give them?
A lot of universities now across the country have programs in national security. There's several, especially in Washington, that have Homeland Security practices or complete degrees. I know GW, George Washington has one, Georgetown has one. So if that's a true interest, I think if you want to go into CIA, FBI, a lot of those programs are very important. But internships defense contractors are really good places to have internships if you want to go into that type of background, because they are the ones that are actually dealing with some of these contracts and some of these agencies. It's really hard to get a internship at the CIA doesn't really do internships, you know, but in regards to having access to those agencies, it's through those major contractors.
Right. So let's move on to private sector life now. As the principal of your own lobbying firm, can you share with the audience maybe some of the challenges that some of your corporate clients might be facing with a new administration? And it doesn't have to be particular to the Trump administration per se, but just after 8 years of one administration and one way of doing business, now they're going to have to face doing business another way. And I know for many corporations and organizations, they find that to be very challenging, right?
Absolutely, and this is my third, so I went from Bush to Obama, now to Trump, so I've seen it on both sides, but my firm is bipartisan, but it's heavily Republican, but I do have Democrats, which is very important. I mean, if you want to live in Washington and work in Washington, you have to have both sides, and completely agree with that. And believe me, I was a Republican in Washington in 2006 and 7 and 8 when we lost everything, and it's not fun, right? But it is what it is, and that's why democracy works so well.
That's right.
But to answer your question, I think the biggest challenge for my clients, especially this administration, but it happens every time, is just the change. I mean, you have to assume that all the major political appointments will not be filled in administrations for, I think the Bush administration, I remember going into September and we were just getting our assistants and deputy assistant, or our assistant secretaries and above announced. So everyone says that, you know, Trump's so far behind.
He's really not.
He's not really. It's the same every administration. It takes a long time to get these people confirmed in the Senate. And it's just how things work. But I think that clients on day one of an administration think, wow, I need to go see this person in the White House or this person in the White House, and there's like 5 people working in the White House at that time, and no one knows where a pencil is.
Or the bathroom.
Or the bathroom. And so it's really, and then they also want to be they don't want to, you know, Microsoft doesn't want to see that Intel is meeting with, you know, someone in the White House. So it's a lot of that, but it's just waiting and having patience to have people in there, and then it will start functioning. And I do have to say, whether what you see in tweets or whatever, the agencies in this administration are working, and they are, a lot of former colleagues of ours from the Bush administration have gone back in. A lot of House and Senate staff have gone back in, and they know how Washington works, which is, you know, can be good or bad in these days. But things are I mean, if you watch the coordination, for example, with tax reform between the House, Senate, Treasury Department, Commerce Department, everyone that's involved, it's actually a coordinated effort right now.
Right.
And so it's patience for my my clients. It's managing expectations. Yes.
Right. And this is interesting. And for your clients who just absolutely find themselves on the opposing side of the administration, you know, there's conventional wisdom. It doesn't matter what side, where you fall on a particular issue, you still need to engage, right? What is the advice that you give to your clients when they are just absolutely on the opposing side? Do you advise them, hey, we need to find where there's synergy, we need to engage, or stand down?
A perfect example of that would be, we do a lot in the tech space and on this immigration issue, on H-1B visas and bringing people in from the tech industry. And so you have major corporations involved in the tech industry that are adamantly opposed to what this administration is doing on immigration. So, but then at the same time, they are super happy of what they're doing on tax reform.
Right.
Or other issues that are big corporate issues. And so what we've been trying to do is for those clients is let the appropriate people in the administration know where your issues are in regards to, say, immigration and what your concerns are. But don't start fighting it out, and I can't believe I say this, but don't start fighting it out in the media. So, because that's where it goes back and forth,
Right.
and then you end up on the blacklist and, whatever. So just do what you have to do in regards to your shareholders, and I mean, I understand there's two audiences, but you don't need to pick a fight because they'll fight back. And so that's that's been our measured approach. We don't need to come out. And I have one client who was on one of the advisory boards for the president and was very involved in a lot of different issues within the administration, but his major issue was climate change.
Oh.
And so when we pulled out of the Paris deal, he's called the administration and said, listen, I so appreciate what I was doing, but I need to step aside because I don't believe in this, and this is what my whole company is based on. And so there was no bad tweets, there was nothing. I mean, it was okay.
Right.
But they handled it quietly, not in the press.
So let's talk about tech for a minute, because I mean, I know a lot of millennials are very interested in the tech issue. We know that this administration has just sort of gone back and forth with Silicon Valley, mostly on the immigration issue. What are your thoughts on kind of the way forward with respect to the administration and sort of the tech industry coming together, working together on anything? I mean,
I see it happening on tax reform.
Good.
I really do.
Good.
Jared's in charge, Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, excuse me, I was going to say nephew. He's in charge of that. But there's a lot of times that these tech companies they're meeting with the administration, they're meeting with the president, and they're not, what they have done now from one of the beginning is those meetings were always broadcasted. And I think that there was a lot of pushback then from employees in Silicon Valley and other places. And I think now they're doing them more behind the scenes and they're not doing them. So I think there's a lot of coordination. And listen, there's a lot of major companies that if tax reform passes, it's
a lot will benefit. So
lot.
this is worth their while to engage and advocate and
they may not agree on
all the other issues, but at
Correct.
least you can see them coming together on tax reform. And I think people want to see that, right?
I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
I would think it's exhausting right now, just all the fighting, and I'm sure it is for everyone not there as well.
And to bring it back to sort of the general theme of engaging women across all these various entities, and for your clients that have issues that impact women, and we always say every issue is a woman's issue, education, consumer issues, healthcare, all important to women. But what have you found in your experience to be some of the most effective ways that your corporate clients can engage women on these various issues that they have, before Congress?
That's a tough one. I actually have not seen, the only way I have seen clients get involved on issues is more trying to promote women in regards to running for office.
That's great, though.
And right, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, we're so backward as a country in that aspect, and it's one of my passions. But that is where they are. There's certain companies that are really trying to raise their profiles in regards to women, and I've seen a lot in the last 6 months, as you know, a lot of corporations would like women to run their DC offices. There's very few at the moment, so major corporations are trying to bring in women to do that. But, and they'll invest in this project or this project, but I don't think, and I haven't seen, at least in my experience, anything that's holistic,
Right.
Promoting women, because I think it's this is Washington's still a man's world.
Right.
I mean, my firm is one of three women-owned law firms in the city, which there's probably 1,000 lobbying firms.
At least.
And so that shows you just how backward this is. But I do think by some of these major companies putting women in the head of their office is a big statement.
Push. And what do you think we could do more at the political level? We've talked about this at several of the discussion groups about the reluctance for women to run for office. The fundraising
I think
can
that's
be
a
big obstacle. I'd love to get your thoughts, and I'm sure our audience would love to get your thoughts on, what are some of the biggest obstacles? Is it the money? Is it, we tend to see women that like to run after perhaps the kids are in college, because when you've got little ones, and say, for example, you're representing Kansas, that means you're traveling to Washington, D.C., at least if you're serving at the congressional level 3 days a week, where the little one's going to go to school. Are they going to move to Washington with you? Are they going to stay back in Kansas? So there's a couple things. We'd love to get your thoughts on that.
There's been lots of research done on this, and I think that the main issue on the women's side is fundraising. And I think that you have Emily's list on the Democrat side, which Democrats do so much better than Republicans on women.
Better.
I mean, it's embarrassing for the Republican Party. And we're losing a couple. We're losing this Congresswoman,
Right.
Congressman Jenkins from here, which is a huge loss in Congress. But I think it's tiring with the fundraising, and I think that some of these outside groups that are being formed on the Republican side is to help women raise money. And that is Emily's list, for example. They have so many people. They have millions of people in their database. If they give $10 each, they're getting a ton of money.
Right. And we really don't have a
list.
comparable
No.
Emily's list on our side, and it's shameful. I mean,
Correct. And that's the
Yeah.
organization we talked about. Is that
Right.
something that's going to fill that gap, hopefully. But I think that also, if you look at, there's no women that chair any major committees in Congress on the Republican side. I mean, we have minority chairs with Senator Murray.
Right.
So we have nothing with that. We have one woman in House leadership,
and that's Kathy
Morris Rogers, who does have 3 kids
and she
lives
does,
in
and
Washington
one has
State.
Down syndrome, and she's a hard-working mom. She's got a lot going on.
But my main push has been also that women can talk taxes, women can talk business, women can talk national security, we don't have to talk about, and this isn't a criticism, but we don't just talk about education. We can talk about the tough, hard issues as well. And so instead of every old male, white male, talking about homeland security, so can Martha Roby, who sits on there, who's a congresswoman.
From California.
Correct.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, Alabama. I was thinking of
Mimi.
Mimi.
Yeah. But so that has been my main push, just with leadership as well as with companies, going back to your corporate companies, is if there's a speech, have the woman be the keynote speaker on tax reform, right? I mean, Lynn Jenkins, going back to Lynn Jenkins, her committee that she sits on is the tax rating committee. She should be out there talking about tax reform instead of, X, Y, and Z.
Right. And to get back to your point about issues that women can address, for small business owners, women comprise a number of new business owners, small business owners, and the reason why they do that often is because they want to have income and build a business while they have little ones. And I know we have a number of former small business owners in Congress, House and Senate, and they could be very visible leaders. Just yet another example. They could be very visible leaders on these hard issues. Because as we know, small businesses are the backbone of the U.S. economy, yet we're really not seeing them like we could see them.
Correct.
Really. Right?
I hosted a fundraiser for a woman, I'm not going to say her name, member of Congress yesterday, and she was talking about the child tax credit, and she worked all through she had 3 kids, worked the whole way, put herself through law school, whatever, and she was at one point they were talking about not eliminating the child tax credit, but maybe just ramping it down. And she's like, I finally said to my leadership, there are 6 white men discussing and determining tax reform and going to get rid of the child tax credit, and none of them probably use it because they weren't at home taking care of their children. And she's like, I mean, she was just saying, as a very staunch Republican, she was like, I'm not voting for it if they do that. I mean, there's just, so
Yes.
it was, there's
Yet another example of, why
Exactly.
we need to diversify the faces of discussing these issues.
Correct.
Let's talk about mountain climbing. Okay, so raise your hand if the thought of climbing a mountain is scary to you. Right? I think most people would find
me too,
that.
because I'm afraid of heights.
So let's talk about this a little bit. What was it like climbing Mount Kilimanjaro?
So it was, first of all, I have no idea why I wanted to do it, but I decided to do it. I wanted to do it when I turned 40, and my friend that I did it with was actually Jeb Bush's finance chair, so she couldn't do it that year. I'm 42, so this was 2 years ago.
She was otherwise
She was
occupied.
occupied in Miami. And so we decided to do it this year. And then once you sign up, I did not buy the insurance, because I know if I did, I would probably have canceled.
Okay, tell us about the insurance now.
Well, just
We
you
don't-
can spend,
Okay.
I don't know, a certain amount of money, and if you want to cancel up to a week before, you get all your money back.
Okay.
So I didn't do it because I have to give myself the pressure. And the whole experience was fascinating. I mean, I'm not a climber. I'm afraid of heights. But it was 8 days sleeping in a tent, freezing, no showers.
And so let me back up for a minute. So do you do this, do you go with a group and, okay.
We
tell us all
hire,
this.
you go as an outfit,
Okay.
like you go on safari. So there was
Okay.
10 of us. They had 45 people that are Tanzanian that were Sherpas, back for
Okay.
better words, and they accompanied you on the trip, and they put the tents up, and they cooked food. And so
Okay.
you didn't have to do all that.
Right.
And the hardest part, physically it was okay. I mean, it was the altitude that's always the problem.
Right. And how do you manage that? Because I just know from, the movies, Mount Everest, altitude's always an issue. How do you manage that?
They have medicine now.
Okay.
So
all
you
right.
can take, not over the counter, you get a prescription for 7 days, and and it works sometimes and it doesn't. And fortunately, it worked for me.
Okay.
I would say, so the physical part wasn't that hard. The part that was hard for me was just being cold, and also just being dirty and sleeping in a tent for 7 and 8 days. Next to my tent, my friend who slept like this far away from me. But also it was just very sad. I mean, the Sherpas in our outfit, we made sure that we wanted to go with the group that treated their people the best, but they make $10 a day, and they made $70 a week. And so that, to me, and this outfit supplies them with clothes, but a lot of the other people on the mountain, were climbing in flip-flops. And
In the cold?
In the cold, well, yeah.
In flip-flops?
They don't have anything else.
Yeah.
And that $10 a day, and this is seasonal, so they don't even have full year-around
Jobs.
And so I didn't come home with one thing. I mean, my personal person didn't have a sleeping bag. So, I left my sleeping bag, my coats, I mean, everything, because they have nothing. And so that, to me, was just, that was the hardest part to me, to be honest with you. Physically, you can get through that, and I made it to the top, and that was my goal. And then I was like, can we call a helicopter to pick us up? Because I don't want to go back down. I'm over this. Which you can't, because Tanzania doesn't have helicopters. Who knew?
Right.
Not that I would anyway, but so that part was hard
Yeah.
for me. And and the thing that most of the people that do this are American and Canadian.
Really?
And there's some Europeans, but there's a lot of Americans and Canadians, and it's a
It's a tourism type of thing for them.
Correct.
Right? So tell us about the prep. Because I know I see people, you guys have probably seen people around town walking with packs on their back, and I always assume that they must be training to climb something. Did you have to do any of that?
I went on 3 different trips, just little trips. Like I went to
Okay.
North Carolina and climbed. I went to California and climbed. So I went to Colorado. So I
Okay.
did that throughout the year, just for 3 or 4 days. And then also I'm a cyclist. I do I do Soul Cycle. You know what that is.
Yeah.
And
Does everybody know what Soul Cycle is?
it's kind of obsessed. It's like this crazy inside biking thing, and you lift weights, and I don't know. It's for 25-year-olds, not 42-year-olds, but I still act like I can do it. So I did a lot of that, and I run. So I did not do anything different besides the climbing. I didn't hike around Washington with my backpack
with your
on.
backpack.
No.
And do you think you'll do another climb? Let's hear about that.
No.
No?
I liked it. I would never do Kilimanjaro again. I mean, I think so the best part about this is we can replay this. So my husband, who is in much better shape than me, did Kilimanjaro 10, 12 years ago, and they didn't have the medicine, and he didn't make it to the top. So half the reason I was so happy about myself is I beat my husband, right? So if my son ever wants to go, he can take him.
Nice.
But no, I liked it. It was a personal goal of mine. It's check it off the list, and now I need another one if anyone has any suggestions.
Would you ever think about Everest?
No,
No. Why not?
because I'm afraid of heights, and that's like a lot of...
Now, that does take training, right? I mean,
Correct,
that
and
is...
it's a lot of,
equipment.
yes.
Yeah, that's...
And I couldn't do that, no.
Yeah.
And this is, Kilimanjaro, if anyone ever wants to do it, it's more of it's a trek, so you're not hanging off of a mountain.
Right. It's more, how do we say it? It's climbing, but it's also kind of like hiking, isn't
Correct.
it? Because you're not going up.
Right. There's a little bit of climbing, but not like
Yeah.
Everest.
Yeah.
And Everest is really cold.
Colder than, obviously, Kilimanjaro. Yeah.
And Kilimanjaro is the highest freestanding mountain in the world. But there's other higher mountains.
Right.
So, but
Right,
it was fun. The whole experience was great. I'm a huge fan of Africa, so.
And I know that, just one more question. I know that you travel quite a bit internationally, and you do work with the International Republican Institute, but Ashley also has 2 degrees, international degrees, one from Brazil and Spain. How has that at all, if any, impacted your travel, your work? Really, you're an international person. So tell us a little bit about your studies overseas and how that may or may not have impacted not only personal travel, but also professional and working with your clients.
My degrees was through Georgetown, which is why it's a business degree, but you get 3 different degrees, business degrees from these different universities, just kind of explain it. But all my clients are multinational, and so for me, that's my area of, I'm in politics, but I love business. And so for me, and to understand my client's business and the whole international aspect, that's why I wanted to do the international degree. It's the biggest thing I learned from that in regards to travels is just the cultures.
Right.
Spain, in regards to their education system, is a lot like ours. Nothing was compared to Georgetown or our academic system, I think, here in the U.S. Spain was almost there, but South America, Brazil is like, if you want to do a paper, go ahead. If you want to go dancing, go ahead. It was like very, I was like, this is, so it was like not as difficult.
Right.
But what I loved the most about it, though, was there were only 2 Americans in our class, so everyone else was from around the world. And a lot of the people in the class were actually from Latin and South America as well as Africa. One from China, but I thought there would be a ton from India and China, and there weren't.
Wow.
Yes.
With that, we'll end, and thank you, Ashley, and we'll open it up to questions and comments. There's our friend.
Thank you for being here today. I just have a simple question. What do you think the role of mentors has been in your life, and have you ever had the chance to mentor other women upcoming in lobbying, the industry, and any other federal agency, that kind of thing?
It's a great question. I'm a huge mentor to women. Non-political, political. I love that. I try to do it as much as I can. From both people that are on the Hill or in the administration coming out to business, or young women that want to run for office. So I've been able to do that, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, which goes back to just getting more women involved in business and in politics. I've had good mentors, and they've all been men. When I worked for Governor Ridge, I wouldn't have called him a mentor because that's not the role we were in, but I learned so much off him of just how he treated people and how he was such a gracious, or is, not was, a gracious leader and really cares about people and really cared about solving problems. And watching him after 9/11, giving up his governorship, coming down, and a really bad time. I mean, his first day was the day we declared war on Afghanistan and anthrax hit, and no one knew the word Homeland Security before, really. And so he was just an inspiration, but not a mentor. But my mentor, my main mentor in my life was the chairman of my law firm, actually. And he had a daughter, which I always find that men that have daughters are so much better with promoting women. And he is, I don't know, he's probably 70 now, so he was, early 60s, late 50s. And he just took me under his wing and gave me experiences. And that's really where my international interest came. He was the one that had me run the public affairs firms overseas, so I was on the road all the time, and that I never would have had that experience. And he just gave me that opportunity. I had no knowledge of international work. So I am a huge believer in mentors. And I don't believe in this whole women treat women bad. I think that there are just managers that are bad, and sometimes they're women, and sometimes they're men. But I think that that's overrated.
Don't rush at once. I know everyone's shy.
Yeah.
And I know you have questions up front here.
Thank you for being here today. My question also involves women in politics. And do you feel like there is a double standard for women who are involved in politics where they can't be too emotional, but yet if you come across as overly calculated, that also works against you? So how do you feel about that possible double standard?
I think that's a great question. I actually would expand that not just for politics, but for everything. I think that if a woman in business is overambitious, they get the same criticism. But you're right. Yes, we're held to a different standard. And I think that if you see some of these speakers, whether it's Sheryl Sandberg or anybody else that talks on these issues and has very good thoughts, I think when you enter a room, you always have to be more prepared as being a woman. But I'm okay with that because you should be prepared anyway. And so I think that there's always going to be a double standard. There's going to be a double standard. I actually think that I've probably gotten further in life, especially at my law firm, because I was a woman. Because there's not that many women and now it's recognized so much that women need to be in leadership and women need to be involved in things, that I probably got more opportunities because I was a woman, because they needed women to be a part of something. And so I actually have the total opposite experience in regards to some of those things. But yeah, I'm not going to cry in meetings. But not that anything's wrong with it. Boys cry in meetings too.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
My question's a little bit different than your presentation today, and the topic to me was kind of misleading, or I was expecting something different. But my question to you is, what is your opinion because of the way, especially women, the way we have been treated the last 3 years, what we've went through, what we've had to listen to. Getting the truth has been just almost impossible from anybody. And so there has literally millions of people across America, men and women, who have decided, it doesn't matter which party it is, they are not there for us. So I would like to know your opinion of independence, independent people. We just are not happy with either party. And basically the way we have been treated is just, actually it's unexcusable. And so that's why so many of us, we just cannot relate to either party, and so we're consider ourselves independent.
So are you asking, Ashley, sort of what do independent voters, what should they do? What's left for them? Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Well, when you listen to the to the speeches, on both, it doesn't matter which side. Who can we believe, and are they speaking for us? And you could tell by the donations that they were receiving and this type of thing. The working class people, the people, especially people on Social Security. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. Because of people on Social Security and Medicare. I mean, there's a few million people out there that this is extremely important to us. And, I'm not here, so if these different corporations are wanting to get the woman's vote, I did not hear that today. And it doesn't matter which corporation, whether it be a very small corporation or a very large corporation. I just did not hear what it is that they are doing to protect and serve.
Okay, so essentially your question is, you'd like to know who is representing, Social Security, who is representing the interests of the little people, essentially. Is that what you, right?
The middle class, the working, people that are working.
Elderly, okay.
I'm retired. I've been retired for a long time. I'm very fortunate of the fact that I worked one job and part of another, and I paid into Social Security for years and years and years, and I was able to invest, not big money, but I was able to invest in this type of thing. So I'm probably at a different level than a lot of people out there, but it just really is very aggravating.
Okay.
When you feel like that, everything that is being said and what's being done and this type of thing, and they just basically turn their back on us.
I don't know if I'm going to give you I'll try to answer this. I feel that how Trump was elected was because of what you're talking about. She said, I said about Trump being elected, and she said she doesn't feel that Trump or the Democrats
Fairly represented
anybody.
The voice, right.
I mean, I would think, and would I assume and assumed that because Trump is really not a Republican or a Democrat, in my mind, I mean, he's not a traditional Republican, socially Democrat for sure, but he talked for these people that didn't have a voice. That's what I thought brought him up, with that groundswell. But, go ahead, and doing is, which is why he's frustrated. Yep.
Here's all these people in the middle.
Yep. Well,
So, I mean, it's just,
I think,
I thought I was going to hear something new, something different, something positive. But, I don't care who it is that's out there that's for the people of the United States of America.
I think what his frustration is, which I've seen him, what he's been doing in regards to these executive orders, is he realizes that it's really hard for Congress to function, and it's worse than ever.
Yeah.
And so you see him doing things with his pen and his ability to do it that way, and he can only do so much. exactly, for example, of this is what he did a couple weeks ago with the subsidies on insurance. I mean, he did that because he could do it with his pen, but what he really is doing is forcing Congress to
Right.
deal with it. It was like, I'm going to call your bluff,
Right.
people. So I'm going to do this, and I actually do think. And listen, I'm not a Trump apologist at all, and I'm not going to go into that debate because it's hard. But I don't think he cares right now if he gets reelected. He just wants to. He's going to like blow the system up as much as he can. Now, granted, it's like Guantanamo Bay with Obama. Once you get in and see things and have intelligence and everything else, things just
Doesn't
can't
look so
happen.
great, right.
You can't just close Guantanamo Bay and move those people to New York.
And
Danger there is he might do something really, really drastic. But, let's get back to.
And let me just follow up with Ashley, what Ashley said from our purview of being in Washington. Donald Trump is a leader of the free world, but what he does not have is a vote in Congress. And sort of, as Ashley pointed out, another example is what he did on DACA. He said, okay, here's our situation. I'm going to sign this executive order, and then I'm going to throw it to Congress, and you all need to come up with something in 6 months. So clearly, he is frustrated. We know that he's not a politician. Frankly, I think he's been a Republican for about maybe 10 minutes, right? About 10 minutes. I'm not, not disrespecting him, but that's the reality. And he's clearly an outsider, and then he is frustrated with the lack of cohesiveness and the ability for Congress to get things done. So therefore, he is really he's saying, I'm going to do this, and then you, Congress, need to get to work. Now, I don't know I can't answer it. I don't know where that's going to leave people. But I agree with Ashley, I think part of the reason we have Trump is that there were a frustrated number of Americans who said, you know what, I'm done. So I'm going to give this guy a try.
Whether it's good or bad, we don't know.
When it comes to leadership, I mean, he is nowhere. But my point, I guess, is what I guess I'm not making, is because if these corporations out there, why are we not, that's what I thought maybe we was going to hear a little bit about. Again, whether it's going to be a small corporation, a big corporation, whichever one, how they were trying to reach out to women regardless of their party, regardless of whether or not they were independent, because you won't get off the voting today, or you will not, because you don't have that women there. So, I just feel like,
Well, I do think that corporations,
this is what I'm doing, since I've only been here since the other day, and so I'm trying to get involved in all sorts of different things, and that is one thing about Lawrence, that, there is a lot of different things that you get involved in.
I think corporations reach out to their various stakeholders on specific issues. I think that multinational food corporations reach out to their stakeholders on particular issues. I think the tech, and Ashley gave you a great example, I think the tech corporation is reaching out to their stakeholders and constituents on tax reform issues because that is going to grow their business and expand, here we've got cybersecurity issues. I think those big corporations are really trying to expand and reach out to their stakeholders and the importance of tax reform. So I do think that corporations are reaching out to their stakeholders on their particular issues. We may not see it because we may not be one of their stakeholders, but I do think on their particular issues, they do reach out to their stakeholders as best that they can.
I've really enjoyed your dialogue today.
Thank you.
Thank you for traveling from Washington to the University of Kansas to the Dole Institute. It's a pleasure having you here. On this issue of Washington gridlock, I do understand America's frustration, and I think whether you're a Republican or whether you're a Democrat or an independent or other, there's a lot of gridlock. We all, those of us in the system and those of us out of the system, would agree on that. In theme with the issue of women in leadership here today, I would like to know if you have anything, any commentary on whether or not you think women are the bridge for creating bridges for a dialogue of consensus to move our nation forward. What role do you see that happening? You addressed a little bit about women's inability, particularly in the Republican Party, to fundraise, and that being a major barrier for women being elected in the Republican Party. But to move our nation forward and create a dialogue that once existed in the years of Bob Dole, I think most of us would agree that Bob Dole, regardless of our party, was an outstanding bridger of gap and was a man of wanting to create a leader who created consensus, particularly between Kennedy and Bob Dole in the Senate, and in creating a forum to actually make compromise possible. Our system needs compromise. Americans are throwing up their arms and wanting solutions. I'd like to hear what you have to say about the role of women, regardless of what our party identification is, on how we can work together to maybe harness what is in the best interest of Americans in creating a national dialogue that can begin to create constructive bridges to foster the development of goodwill in our society.
I think just to kind of do it from a broad approach, I don't know if you remember 2 or 3 years ago now, the women senators. I think it's just from a, let's just take it from elected official perspective. I think it's very hard on the House side to do that because of Minority Leader Pelosi, and just her role as the head of the House Democrats is to attack the Republicans. So there's already bad blood, and that's normal, right? But in Senate side, 3 years ago, the Republican and Democrat women in the Senate came together to strike a deal in the budget.
Yep.
And they were the ones that worked out the compromise and took it to Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell. And I think this was when the Democrats had the Senate, maybe.
Yep.
And that's what got over the gridlock. That group of women are still fairly close, and now there's more. I mean, there's only 5 Republicans, they do work together. They do try to do things together. However, none of them are in leadership. I mean, Elizabeth Warren is in leadership in this new creative position, but she doesn't have the power to do. She's not Schumer or or Durbin. She's not Mitch McConnell. So I think that these off groups are helpful, but until that any of them are in positions that they can act, and you know this, being in Washington, it's all run from the top down.
Right.
And so until that we have true women in leadership, except just for figureheads, it's going to be really hard.
And running major committees, we might add. I mean, chairing the big money committees where you have that power.
Well, I see a lot of hope with Senator Collins in trying to create bridges on particular issues. And it just seems to me that the general nature of most women, I think, is to try to create compromise.
Yes.
I think it is something to hormonally, with estrogen and our brain chemistry, is to create community. And so I'm wanting to know how we, if you would reflect a little bit more on gridlock, a little bit more. Do you think that as a reaction to Trump, with so many people being opposed to his style, that are more established leaning, whether Democrat or Republican, that new consensus can be formed there amongst establishment as a reaction to extremism?
The problems were there before him. Can one make the argument they are exacerbated because of his style? Depends on, where you come down. If you come down on the side, look, I want these 535 members of Congress to be working for me because I pay their salaries. If you come down on that side, you say, you know what? This guy's kind of refreshing because he's forcing them to work. If you come down on the side, well, I don't care for Trump, I don't like his, like this woman said, I don't like his leadership style, then, maybe you want business as usual, or you would like, plain and simple, you just don't like this style, and you're going to defer to Congress. I mean, I think really that's where people are coming down, and then there's those that are in between. But in answer to your question, the gridlock was there before he came to town. It's been there. So I don't want to take away from Ashley.
I totally agree. I actually think that some of these things that Trump's doing, these bombs that he's throwing, DACA was a perfect example.
I think DACA was great.
I mean,
he's
forcing Congress
right.
not to be gridlocked on DACA.
Right. I like
in
that.
6 months, if they don't come up with a deal, he's going to do something much worse than they would in regards to,
which they should have done, I don't know, 6 years ago. They've been sitting on this, we need a comprehensive immigration reform bill, period.
Yeah.
This signing executive orders and all this, these are all just patchwork problems. Congress needs to do their job.
And just like the subsidies, which I talked
Exactly.
about, people are going to start the insurance. It's going to be a really big problem if Congress doesn't deal with it. And I think he's just like, and I respect it on one aspect because living it every day, it is very frustrating, the gridlock. And if Congress doesn't deal with it, then you know what? He's going to deal with it much worse, which is going to be worse for the Republican Party at the end of the day. And we have to remember, Republicans are going to be held responsible for everything.
For Obamacare, or failure to do something with it. And here's the bottom line here. You're all, I think most of you are all over 18. Everybody's are voters. If you don't like the job that your representative or senator is doing, then it's your job to vote them out. We don't live in North Korea. We live in America where we have a democracy and your vote counts. And you get your community together, you get your church together, you get your neighbors together, and you say, you know what? I don't like what she or he are doing. They're out. They're gone. That's how people get elected and get voted out of office. But people need to take to the streets if you don't like what your person's doing.
Thank you for coming out today. I have a question for students who are here as well. So with politics increasingly becoming polarized a lot on college campuses, there's a lot of discourse and hot topics, campus carry, other things that are going through right now that have been causing a lot of discourse, sometimes heated discourse on campuses. So what advice would you give to students who are here to continue the discourse, but in a way that doesn't result in something like Berkeley? So have conversations that do make an impact and that are meaningful, but don't necessarily end up hostile.
Well, first of all, the fact that I think so many so many students are actually interested in politics is amazing.
Yay.
I mean, because when I was
Thank you.
in 1990, I was a junior in 1996 when in college when Bob Dole ran, and I don't think anyone knew it. Really. I mean, no one cared. But I think the whole country's polarized, and I think it's sad. But I also think that and this is what I tell my 8-year-old who goes to a very liberal school, everyone has their opinions, and you should listen, and you should respect them, and you should let the other side talk. And then, because if you don't, and people can't talk politics at all anywhere they go anymore, and it's mainly Trump, but it's mainly just people are angry. And so I think it's very difficult. And I would be interested in because I don't know how to deal with it myself, because I try to keep my mouth shut. But because I'm a Republican, right? And like I said, a lot of our friends are in the administration, but also I'm so proud of this country that, and and I want to tell this story, and it will take me 2 seconds. We had the ambassador of the Congo staying at our house. Long story short, my husband's involved in Africa work, and he was staying at our house the 2 nights after the election. And he said, I know that your country's mad right now, the people that supported Senator Clinton, but your country is not killing each other. There's not people in the streets shooting each other. And you should be so proud to be in this country that everyone can stand up and be mad and do a women's march and protest. And that's why this country's so great. So, I mean, you're going to get it forever. And I think that if you believe in Trump or if you were a Hillary person, if you respect somebody, you hope for the respect back, but I don't know if it will happen. I think it's a very difficult, I think there's a very emotional right now. The country is very emotional.
Isn't a lot of this, just a second, I got to think of my question again. I forgot. As far as students go, I think it's wonderful that students are very interested in what's going on, but it troubles me a lot that they are not willing to listen to different points of view.
She's shaking her head, yeah.
Yeah, now, is a lot of this gridlock because of poor leadership in the House and Senate? Does this rest on certain committees that are supposed to be, I mean, they say things all come from committees, so is it lack of strength and purpose in committees?
That's a complicated one,
Yeah,
isn't it?
I actually, though, have a strong opinion on this in regards to how the House and Senate used to be run and how it's run now. You voted with your party and your leader when they asked you for a vote. So when Denny Hassert was Speaker of the House or Bob Dole was Majority Leader, you stuck together as a party.
Right.
There were maybe some people that couldn't vote for certain, district reasons or something like that. But, and you know what? You weren't going to be on a powerful committee if you didn't play with your leadership. There's no, and I actually think this happened with John Boehner, when the Freedom Caucus people were elected, or the people that were the Tea Party, those 35 members, and there's still that many now, they have their own voice that is usually against leadership in the Republican Party, and that's 35 votes then that Boehner and Paul Ryan cannot get the bills across the finish line, because those 35 people don't care that they go against their leaders. And if that would have happened under Denny Hassert, you would have been off your committee, and you would be sitting on, like, I don't know, the Science and Technology Committee or something. Like you were not going to be on Ways and Means or Energy and Commerce, which are the two appropriations, which are like the 3A committees. You'd be yanked off that tomorrow. There's no, I feel it's like, the process now of everyone gets a trophy because you participate and, instead of winning and losing, which we all did. It's like that. You're not, and I don't know if it's poor leadership or it's just how things are now. No one's feet are held to the fire.
Right.
So who is it that yanks people off of committees?
Nobody
I
now.
don't think anybody
No,
gets yanked
but
now.
whose job
Oh, the
was it?
speaker and the
Okay,
speaker
so
and the
you're
majority
talking
leader.
about weak speakers then?
It's a different management style. I think that it's not, I would never say Paul Ryan's weak. I would say that he tries to get all the different sides together in consensus. And then if you can't do it, it's fine. There's no accountability if you don't come to the table. It's just.
Right. I think, to Ashley's point, Paul Ryan has a tough job. You are corralling 435 people with 435 different agendas. And 435 people have their own constituencies to answer to. I just can't imagine doing that job. It is a tough job.
Yep.
So this is where Democrats come in then and going across the aisle. If we can't get Republicans to do it, and that doesn't seem to be happening, so are the Democrats just trying to kill everything so they can take over next time?
That's their strategy on health care and taxes, yes. Which it was our strategy too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not.
It's the minority strategy.
Correct.
The
But
minority
I
party.
think that if you listen to what Trump says is fine. I'm not going to deal with you guys on the Republican side anymore. I'm going to deal with the Democrats. This is why he cut the deal with Nancy and Chuck, you know, on the debt limit
Right.
stuff. I mean, if you guys can't function, I'm going to do it for you. Which I actually think we'll see how tax reform goes. If tax
Right.
reform happens by the end of this year or the first quarter next year, I think that it will be a major victory for this president.
Now, that is leadership. It may be leadership that some may not agree with, but that is leadership. One more? Okay.
Looking to 2018 and possibly 2020, can you identify maybe some young female candidates either at state level or national level who you would advise just to keep an eye out for?
I think that not all the races everyone's jumped in yet, but I do think that there's Elise Stefanik, who's one of my favorites. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's going places, and it'll be interesting to see where she goes. Mm-hmm. She doesn't have a state. She could probably get in the Senate 'cause she's from New York. But she is, Elise Stefanik, she's the youngest woman member of Congress, and she was elected in her 20s. She was 29. Yeah. I think she is going to have a tough race, but I think that she is very well liked and very well respected from leadership, and she's on pretty good committees. I do know there's a big effort nationwide to try to get more Republican women, at least, to run in some of these districts. I think that Barbara Comstock is always someone to watch. She is going to be around, and her election's always tough, but she's one of these practical people that are like 6 white men, you know, making the tax reform. I mean, she's very good. Shelley Moore Capito in the Senate.
Yes.
She's part of this younger generation. She and Gillibrand. I'm just kind of giving Republicans more than
Kristen
Democrats.
Gillibrand is one she's going to be around a while.
And this woman, Kamala
Harris
in
from
California.
I think she's a rising star as well.
She was the Attorney General, just became the senator from California.
Just took over Barbara Boxer's retiring seat.
And she's been thought of as a candidate for president, the same as Gillibrand. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the Democrats put up another woman candidate. I can see that happening.
Yep, for sure.
And I think Nikki Haley
Yes,
is a rising star in the
Nikki
Republican
Haley is
Party.
a rising star. I really do. And it's interesting.
I think she becomes Secretary of State at some point.
Yep. Yeah.
And then she probably takes that, and she's a great.
I think she's done an amazing job.
Yes, and she's been able to manage this administration.
Yes, on some tough issues. Are we
So.
out of time now? Well, thank you, Ashley
Sure.
Davis. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's just it's a pleasure to see you all every week. I just want to preview next couple sessions. I only have 2 more as my time here at the Dole Institute. In 2 weeks, we'll have Sandra Westfall, who is the Washington editor for People magazine. And then the very last session with me as a fellow will be Alan West, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, on November 28th. So I hope to see all of you back here again. And thank you again, Ashley
Sure.
Davis.
Thank
Thank you all.